I'm now going to show you an alternate method of exporting plants from View into Lightwave to be rendered by Lightwave. So first what we're going to do is create a new scene. And I'm going to go to Object, and I'm going to create Plant from Species, so from Plant Species. And I'm going to select the Gnarly Tree E. It's going to load it into the scene and create a proxy object. The export times can sometimes be a little long depending on the plant you're exporting. The typical export method would be to open the plant editor, so to edit the object, and then what we would do is select the export plant, and then we could set it up for LWO object and color and alpha maps. Now the biggest problem is when the materials have procedurals built into them, things like the bark or different bump maps on the leaves, they can take either a while to render or they don't render at all and sometimes just crash the program. So this method would be to export the object as the proxy state. Now the proxy itself can be modified by increasing the geometry quality. Right now the geometry, it says it's 150,000 polygons, but that's the view version. The proxy object is not nearly as high of a quality. So we can hit the ×2 to increase the quality, and that will slightly increase the quality of the proxy. So we could continually do that until the proxy object becomes a decent state. Once we have the object where it's workable, something we could easily manage, all we need to do is go to File, up at the top, Save Object, Save Current Object, and I already saved this out, so I'm going to select and do a -2 version. And then that's pretty much it for the saving of the object. There's some editing that does need to be done. So what I'm going to do is go to File, and close out xStream. I'm going to go over to Modeler and load in, or actually what we can do is go back to Layout, load in the object, and my camera is set really far away, so we'll just reset that and move it back. And there's just a temporary light in the scene, so I am going to add a distant light. And set its rotation. And go over to Modeler. And now we can see that tree showing. Now pretty much all the proxies end up being in layer 2. So if you need to copy and paste it over to layer 1, you could just hit Control-X to cut it, and Control-V to paste it, so that it's in layer 1, if that matters. But the biggest thing is, well, besides the way the geometry is set up, not all the branches are going to be connected, but that is just the way the view branches are. The higher quality the proxy object, the more likely you're going to have a good connection between the branches. You can clean it up if needed, or just use the regular view export method, but then you have to recreate all of the materials and save out all of the images, so it really depends on how you want to do it. This I found to be a pretty good method. The main thing we need to do is hit M on the keyboard to merge the points. We're going to stick with the automatic mode. We can turn off the keep 1 point polygons and click OK. So it's going to delete almost 300,000 points and merge everything together. We can save it, switch back to layout, and the main modification is, for some reason, all of the smoothing thresholds on the proxy objects are set to 18 degrees, which is too low. So I'm going to do 89 for all of the surfaces and also the leaves. But the leaf material is set up already, which makes it a little bit easier. So all we'd need is just a bark surface. If the object and the view object has a bark surface, it should transfer over to the proxy, provided that it's a single layer material. So I'm going to clear out the scene, and we're going to load in another object. So create plant from species, and I'm going to select one that I'm pretty sure has a regular bark texture. I'm going to select the maple tree. I'm pretty sure it is a procedural for the texture, but we may be able to, or we can just load in a bark texture in the view to transfer that over. Or just setting up a bark texture in Lightwave wouldn't be that hard. One nice thing is all of the polygon selections, surface selections are already made when transferring this over. There's an alternative method too, which I'm going to show in just a second, or another way to improve the plant quality. So I'm going to do the same thing as before, or I'm going to edit the object. We could increase the quality. Keep it in mind that ×2 does not actually double the resolution. So now this is a fairly decent looking tree. We would just need to save it and merge the points. The bark, though, some of the sections and the branches still are not connected. If we take a look and edit the object's material, the bark in this case is not great, because the procedure would have to be rendered. I also want to mention, if we need to edit the leaf material, because in this case it defaulted to the first surface, which was the bark, what we can do, besides opening the material summary and just opening the leaf, if you have a massive scene and it's a lot of materials, it's going to be hard to pick out some of those objects. So if you have the object selected, you can go to Edit, or just open the object properties, and then you can switch between every texture, every material that is assigned to that object, and then edit it from there. So the object properties can sometimes be a much better method for that. We can also load in new surfaces. And I'm going to load in one of my bark surfaces and bark materials. Now, this bark uses a mixed material. Mixed materials don't transfer texture maps over to the proxy. And that's because I used a mixed material with a distribution function in order to remove the tiling effect that can show up on any sort of repeating texture. Whichever is material 1 is going to be preserved once I convert it to a simple material. So I'm going to swap these and go to simple material. Click OK. OK again. And take a look at the surface editor. And it looks like in this case the material was not transferred. So I am going to edit the object. And we can grow a new plant, and it may have to be due to the mapping mode. I'm going to edit the object material. We are in the parametric mode. And it's because it's a procedural color. At least that is the way it is set up. So I'm going to set it over to map picture, which shouldn't affect anything. And we might be able to pull out that texture. So go into edit the object. Every plant species is different, unfortunately. So in this case, it would just be better to load in the bark surface directly onto the object. But we still have the surfaces separated, which is pretty nice. The other method I want to show you is to bake the object to polygons in view before using the proxy. Because a lot of times the proxy of a mesh will be of higher quality. So if we go to the Bake to Polygons option, which is available under Object, so under the Object menu with the object selected, we're going to bake it to polygons. We can set the mesh resolution, which isn't always accurate, be warned. So I'm going to bring it up a little over halfway and click OK. And now we have a mesh and a proxy that is much closer to the actual geometry from view. And it does look like the texture map may have been transferred over now. So we can now see that showing. It is set up to the UV map. So we do have UV maps also available, created with the proxy object. The leaves in this case are showing incorrectly. So we may have to go through the UV maps. But this is a really nice quick way, because now we can just save this object with minimal editing. And I also want to mention, if you want to break apart the individual surfaces into objects or layers, you can also split every single object in view that has a separate surface, more specifically with trees. So vegetation, if it has separate surfaces and separate materials assigned, and this one has leaves and then the bark, once the object is baked, you can edit the object to open up the mesh options. And there's an option to split. It's going to show how many materials there are. Also give you a readout of how many polygons and vertices. We can also set up baking, illumination baking, and create maps for that. But I'm going to select the split option and click OK. This is going to give us two different materials, or two different objects based on the materials. So we're going to have one for the bark, and we're going to have one for the leaf. So the bark and the leaf. And the maple tree should be the group object. I'm going to open up the scene editor, and we can see that the maple tree is the top, the parent object, and then we have the bark, the maple. So now we can save out this maple tree. And it looks like it won't let me do it because it's not set up as a Lightwave group object. So we will have to save them individually, the bark and then the leaves. So we're going to call this maple bark. Save object, current object, maple leaf. And then we can just piece those together in Modeler. where we have the maple leaf and the maple bark. And you may need to merge the points because the proxy object does not merge points. All of the polygons are disconnected, so you still will have to go through, merge these points. It looks like for the leaves they are merged, but not for the bark, the surface. We can go back and close out the scene. And I want to mention that because the group object was a view object, it's going to clear out everything in it. So we did lose those objects from the scene, but they are saved out. So we can just send them back to layout. And I'm going to take the leaves, cut them, and paste them on the first layer of the bark, save it, and then we can switch back to layout. Go to our camera. And now we can see the tree. And I'm going to go ahead and set up a parent. So M on the keyboard to enter motion options and set layer 2. Oh, looks like it was selected on layer 2. So set layer 1, so selecting layer 1, which are the leaves, to be parented by layer 2. So the bark, layer 2, is the parent, and those will move together. You also note that the texture maps for the leaves have corrected themselves. And now it's just a matter of adjusting the bark surface and changing the scale to match correctly. So there were a couple of UV maps created, and we can choose from them. So going to the surface editor, we've got the bark, and now there are actually several maps that we can choose from if they are assigned to the right objects. So it looks like 5 is going to be the bark surface. We might just need to edit the UV. Or just use the texture map, set up maybe a cubic mapping mode. That'll also work. Just another way to be able to get plants out of view a little quicker in some cases, really depending on the plant. I also want to note that these images are saved to that temporary directory where all of the proxy objects are stored to and proxy materials. So if you need to copy the images from there and save them to your content directory, you'll need to go to wherever your temporary operating system directory for the view files are stored.